Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So I have slacked off on making videos over the last few days, so I figured I'd come out here and make you like 3 or 4 videos today. How does that sound? Let's talk a little bit about lumber. For those of you who follow my channel, you know I talk a lot about lumber. Lumber is a great indicator of where we are inside of the economy, where we are in new construction. It really kind of tells you on where things are headed. Like if lumber is going up, then generally you know that the demand for new construction is going up. If lumber is going down, then you can kind of see that the economy may be rolling over and that things aren't looking so well. It's not an exact, but it's pretty good. So following the lumber industry is a great way to keep your eye on the economy. There has been so much that has occurred over the last few years that it's unreal. Beetle infestation, wildfires, Canadian, or just trade wars in general, not just Canadian tariffs, but just trade wars in general, interest rates, everything under the sun that could possibly affect lumber prices have been taking place over the last couple of years. And just recently, we saw lumber hit 900 per thousand. Now, to kind of give you an idea, 900 per thousand, that's for every 1,000 board feet of 2x4/8 standing and better, it would sell for $900. That was so extremely high. To kind of give you an idea, 300 per thousand would be like typical, kind of like a more average area, maybe 400 or 500 on the higher end. It hit 650 and everybody thought, holy moly, that's like the highest that it'll ever go to. It dropped back down, but then when it ran up to its just recent new all-time high, it was 900 per thousand. Holy moly. Okay, so setting all the other stuff aside, the interest rates, the demand, the everything, if you just put that all aside for just a second, and let's just focus in on one thing that occurred, the trade wars. Because that really is probably the number one thing that really screwed with the price. At least in my opinion, that's what it was. Inventory levels on the recent end probably had more to do with things just recently reaching the new extreme all-time high. But really, I think it was the tariffs that kicked it in. Because if it wasn't for those Canadian tariffs, there would be a lot more supply coming into the United States. Here's the thing. A few years ago, all these trade wars started occurring. Every country was like, you're gonna charge this much, and you're gonna have to pay this much in order to import, and all this other stuff. And the whole idea of it was to try and beef up your own local supply, like to make it. What do they say? Canadian lumber had an unfair advantage on domestic suppliers because the Canadian government was subsidizing the lumber. That's what the United States said. And because the government was subsidizing those Canadian producers, the United States hit the Canadian government with a 20% tariff, saying, there, take that. You're not going to be shipping in a bunch of cheap lumber into the United States, screwing with our domestic suppliers. Inventory levels started to drop as the Canadian mills started shutting down. It devastated them. At the same time that there was a lack of demand due to these trade wars and everything else that was coming from the United States, they weren't asking for that Canadian lumber no more because it was too expensive. A lot of these Canadian producers had no place to go, and they started shutting down. Places like 100 Mile up in British Columbia, that's all they have. Like for generations, all they did was cut trees and mill lumber. That's it. And there was nothing for them. There was nothing for them to switch over to. It was a very sad story. Some of the articles I read on that was just, it was heart-wrenching. Now, just recently, we had a huge increase in the lumber future prices here in the United States. Actually, this is throughout the world, but here we saw lumber go from like 300, 400 on the futures market up to 900 per thousand. This is so extremely high. It caused the retail price of a 2x4/8, which would normally sell for $2.50, $3 a piece, to be $8.69. Off the charts expensive. How it is that anybody could build a new home with the price of lumber the way it was over the summer was beyond me. The only thing that gave them that shot was the fact that the interest rates were so low. Now, a lot of this had to do with that Canadian tariff, those trade wars. And just recently, the United States has dropped those tariffs. Not completely, but I think they dropped it by about half. So now these Canadian producers should be able to start importing lumber back into the United States at a better price. I would only assume that this is going to cause the price on the retail end or on the futures market to begin with, as the supply starts coming into the United States during a time when there is a slowdown in the construction market, would only lead me to believe that the inventory levels are starting to rise, are going to rise even further, and the demand coming down will cause the price to drop. That is my assumption on things. I assumed earlier in the summer that prices would have come down to a little bit more of a normal area by the end of November. $6 a stud is not normal. $600 per thousand in the lumber futures market is not normal. Whether that turns into the new normal or not, that's to be seen. But as of right now, lumber is still extremely high. And with the Canadians now able to import at a cheaper price, I can only assume that the inventory levels are going to start rising and the prices will come down. All right, so that's the lumber update. Next video, I'm going to talk about UBI. We had a little bit of a discussion on UBI yesterday. Inside of the comments section, I found that it was a lot of very intelligent people putting out some very good arguments for UBI. I would love to discuss that a little bit further. And so the next video, I am going to talk about UBI. I'm going to try and keep my mind as open as possible to the UBI, but I have a very strong belief against UBI. And for those of you who don't know, it's universal basic income. This is basically the idea where everybody would get, like, for example, a $1,200 check a month forever. Everybody in the country. So let me end this video, and I will fire up the UBI video here in just a second, and we'll talk about UBI. All right, Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.